Took a trip to Texas. Every summer since I was 4, my nana took me and my sisters to California. I always loved going, since she had a pool and let me drive around on her golf cart. I blame teen angst, since I was turning 15 that summer, but I threw a huge fit in my mom of going over. I just got a boyfriend and didn't want to go long distance for a month, and all 3 of my younger sisters were going to tag along, meaning I had to babysit. Mom put her foot down, told me to suck it up, so obviously, I was gonna be a pretty pissy teen the whole time. So beginning of June, we load up in Nana and Papa's van and head off. I live in a small coastal town in Oregon, so the trip was going to take around 2 days to get all the way down to Palm Springs. Looking back on it now, I was totally miserable to be around, picking on my sisters, ignoring my grandparents, huffing and puffing the entire time, so I really didn't blame them for what they did. A day had passed since we finally made it to the rental home, when my mom called, excitedly telling me that since I was older now, I get a chance to travel, that it's fully paid for, how grateful I should be, etc. I interrupted her, saying that I go to Cali every year. Why is she so stoked about it this time? No, kiddo, your Aunt Pat is flying you out to stay with her for the next 2 months. She's paying for it all, isn't that so nice? I was so confused. I just stood there listening to her ramble on about the trip I was to take in a few days. Then I started getting pissy. What the fuck do you mean 2 months? Does she live in Texas? Why am I going to fucking Texas? I was livid. Well, it turns out that Papa had grown tired of my teenage moods pretty fast and complained about it to his sister, Aunt Pat. She told him to send me to her. That would be a good experience for me, all expenses paid. Nana and Papa didn't see an issue with it, and neither did my mother. I, on the other hand, saw plenty. My first thoughts were on my boyfriend back home naturally, and being bored alone in Texas wasn't looking like a fun option either. I begged and begged my mom to let me stay in Cali, but she insisted that I go as a learning experience. So the next 2 days I was completely sullen. Up until I was dropped off at the airport, it wasn't until I was actually boarding that I realized I hadn't seen my Aunt Pat or her husband Rick since I was 7. The only form of communication I had with them was the annual Christmas card with the attached $10. To be honest, I don't even remember what they looked like. I tried texting my mom. I had a last-ditch effort to get out of it, but nope. The plane ticket was paid for and I was already boarded. She argued back that I was exaggerating, that it was my papa's sister so I would be fine, and to quit complaining, or she shut my cell phone completely off as a punishment. So I strapped up and flew to Texas. I didn't get into the airport until late, and was worried that they forgot about me. I got to the waiting area, and even though we were the only people there, save for one older Latino man, they were waiting with a sign plastered with my name on it. I gave a meek smile and waved, and they ran up excitedly, asking how about my flights and whatnot. They were an older couple, older than I thought they were, matching gray hair and oddly tall. They were both dressed like tourists, with the Hawaiian dress shirts and khakis, and Rick had shades on with a safari hat. Even though we were inside, I figured they were just weird old people and brushed it off. We arrived back at their house, a really nice one in a rich senior living area. Aunt Pat showed me around the house and to the spare room, which would be mine, and left me be. I instantly called my boyfriend, let him know I landed safe, and told him about the flight and how weird my relatives were. Since I was off on my sleeping schedule, I ended up sleeping in until noon the next day. I groggily rolled out of bed and walked downstairs to get breakfast. I was met with a note on the fridge, explaining that they were both at the store and would be back soon. I ate, showered, got dressed, and waited. They pulled up shortly afterwards and whisked into the house with a huge bag. Aunt Pat grinned and handed me the sack. We got you a little present. We're both just so excited you're here. I opened it up to reveal a hideous star-spangled banner dress with accompanying hair pieces. It was so horrendous. But as a rude of a teen as I wasn't point-blank disrespectful. I gave them both a huge smile and a thanks. Rick pulled out the dress and let it unfold in all its ugly glory. We walk in the summer parade every year, and we want you to walk with us. Our roundabout is flag themed this year. Why don't you just go try it on, make sure it fits? Weirdly, it fit just fine, much to their delight. The parade was in 3 days, and until then, we would do some sightseeing around Texas. For those 3 days, I was completely ill-tempered. Everything they were doing was making me want to scream. I was so annoyed and irritable. They drone on about one thing, argue off tangent about another, and they had a rigorous schedule that my teenage body did not want to keep up with. Waking up very early to go to a snail's pace walk, quick to bed at night with no TV, just basic old people lifestyle, but to a teen, it was hell. All of the tourist spots they took me were very bland, and I was not in the mood to be appreciative. Whether they started to get annoyed with me or not, they never showed it. I wouldn't have cared if they were anyways. I figured they'd just send me home early if I did get on their nerves enough with my moodiness. So the big day comes around and I'm garbed up in my outfit, ready to die of humiliation. The parade was pretty long, walking about 3 miles throughout the neighborhood. I half waved and smiled the entire way, then followed the giant BBQ, which went on until late at night. Aunt Pat told me to stay close to them and to not wander off since I get lost pretty quickly. About an hour of being glued to them, they started to keep less of an eye on me and focused on their friends. I walked off to get some food and decided to keep walking. It was a nice night out and felt good to get some fresh air and freedom. I watched some kids play with the sparklers, adults laughing loudly and spilling their beers, and started to feel a little bit better. I kept strolling on, having a good time watching. When I saw two little girls sprint across the street a couple blocks down from me, waving sparklers, I grinned, thinking about my own little sisters. When I noticed a weird shadow just beyond where the kids had ran, my smile dropped and I froze, peering harder to make out what it was. The shadow moved quickly, following where the girls did. I figured that it was probably just their parent, but the hair standing on my back of my neck said otherwise. I decided that there wasn't any harm in the following, just to make sure my subconscious was wrong, and jogged down the street. I made it to where I saw the girls run by, and looked down the road to check if I could see them. There was a little play structure at the end of the street for the neighborhood kids to play on, and I guess they probably ran down there to play. I made it to the park and heard giggles coming from the tube slide, and a small pile of burnt-out sparklers on the ground below the entrance. I glanced around quickly and didn't see anyone creepy. In fact, I didn't see a parent nearby. Knowing that if my sisters did this, my mom would be livid. It was dark out. No one was around for at least 5 blocks before the party, and it was getting cold and late. I made my presence known to not scare the kids and pretended to get a cell phone so they could hear my voice and know I was a girl and hopefully someone they felt they could trust. "Oh yeah, I'm down in the little park and waiting for ya. See you soon." The giggle stopped and little faces peered out. They couldn't have been more than 4 or 5 years old. I waved hello to them and asked them if they were having fun. They nodded and clambered out. I know how to talk to kids since I've been around them for so long, so they warmed up to me pretty fast. While playing with them for a little, I asked where their parents were, if they knew where they lived. They ignored me and continued to drag me around to play games. "I really like your dress. It looks like mine. My grandma got it for me." One of them did a quick spin for me to show off her bedazzled flag dress. I remember then that all the cul-de-sacs were themed and figured they had to live in one of the houses around Aunt Pat's. I asked if they walked in the parade and they nodded and went off telling me about how fun riding a float was. We had a big flag float on our section, so they must have been up on it, and I didn't see them since I spent most of my time zoned out. As I was playing Super Sleuth, I saw a shadow move from down the street towards the park. I got the heebie-jeebies again and kept my eye on it. The girls had crawled back in the slide during this and were trying to get me to catch them. Something came over me and I told them to be quiet for just a little bit and we were going to play a joke on someone. They loved the idea, thank God, and cupped their hands into their mouth with big grins. By this time, the shadow figure was within the lamppost that illuminated the park, and I could see him clearly. He looked like a normal guy, middle-aged, just slightly disheveled. As he got closer to me, though, the worse I felt. I was sitting on the swing, acting like I was texting when he came up to me. "Have you seen my girls anywhere? I lost them at the parade." He peered around the playground quickly. "I hope they had come here to play." He trailed off and gave me a nervous laugh. His story seemed to add up, but then the girls only mentioned a grandma. "Oh no, I haven't, but I keep an eye out for them. What are their names?" This was the true test, since the girls had already told me their names during me quizzing them. "Oh, Emma and Ava, 2 little girls, blonde. Haven't seen them?" Wrong. Their names weren't even close to what he just bullshitted with. My creepo-meter shot up. I shook my head, no, apologized, and went back to my phone. Since Aunt Pat was tech illiterate, she doesn't text, which left me stuck waiting on this dude to leave so I could call her and explain what was happening. Instead, he decides to pop a squat down on the swing next to me. Great. He starts to make small talk with me, asking me where I lived around, what my name was, if I had a boyfriend. I kept my answer short, making up a fake name, saying my dad was coming soon to get me. His questions started to get more personal. If I was on my period, how old I was, if I was a virgin. I snapped at him and asked why he was bothering me when he should be looking for his kids. That's when I saw the knife. He shifted in the swing and his shirt went up, revealing a huge knife clipped to his pocket. I tried acting like I didn't see it as I pulled up my phone to text my boyfriend to call 911. The guy snatched my cell. He kept asking for my passcode, wanting to see if I had nudes on my phone. I was scared to piss him off and worried if I started yelling, I would scare the girls into making noise. I started acting like I was into him, keep him calm, hopefully get him away from the kids long enough for me to get help in some fashion. I laughed and said I didn't have nudes, but he insisted on getting my passcode. I claimed it was some random 4-digit number, and it locked him out of my phone. He tossed it back to me and told me the phone was busted. He then got up and asked me to help come look for his girls. That would be a faster search if I did. He pointed down the street he had come up from and insisted they must have gone that way. I stood up slowly, trying to stall and figure out what to do, but he slipped an arm around my waist and herded me off. Maybe I should go the opposite way, cover more ground? I tried to peel away from him, but his grip was tight. No, they went this way, no use splitting up. He kept coming up with excuses to keep me there, and I was terrified what would happen if he got mad, so I stayed quiet. His hand kept trailing down my ass, groping it, and it took every ounce of my being to not break into sobs right there. I felt so stupid. What was my plan? I left the girls alone. I'm alone with a crazy person, and no one knows where either of us are. Then I heard the sweet sound of sandals slapping on pavement, and a booming voice yell out, "What the fuck do you think you're doing?" Uncle Rick had come to save the day. He was running down the sidewalk towards me, as fast as a 75-year-old man can, which apparently is pretty fast. The guy suddenly let me go and whipped out his knife, aiming at Rick. I ran away, and started yelling to my uncle that he had a knife. Apparently my aunt and uncle both had concealed weapon permits, and why wouldn't they? It's Texas. He whipped out his gun, and started yelling at me to get back. The man's eyes grow wide, and he throws his knife in Rick's direction, and turns to run and hop the fence, and keeps on running through someone's yard and kept going. Rick lowers his gun and ushers me to him, and I start choking out what happened between sobs. He kept his cool the entire time, and wrapped me in a big bear hug. We went back to the park, and I crawled inside the tube, to find the little girls curled up at the bottom together, asleep. Rick called Aunt Pat, and I woke the kids up, congratulating them on staying quiet so well. They all clamber up when Aunt Pat shows up in the car. I got a good lecture from her, and so did the girls. Apparently Aunt Pat knew them and their grandma, and loaded us up and took us back to the BBQ, which was now shut down and replaced with a search party and police. The girls ran back to Grandma, and I had to explain what happened to the police and give a description of the guy. Turns out they had multiple calls on him for hovering around the playground and following kids home from the bus stop. They were surprised when I said Rick hadn't shot the guy, just scared him. The cop turned to my uncle and asked why he didn't, and Rick gestures to me. She's from Oregon. Didn't want to make her liberal ass shit itself. The next day, Aunt Pat woke me up early and drove me to a gym where she had paid for a trainer to give me self-defense lessons for the rest of the time I was in Texas. After the incident, I was much less of a dickhead scene and did a 180 on my mood. Aunt Pat didn't even call to tell my mom, saying there was no point in worrying her if we've handled it. I don't know if they've ever caught the creep, but I definitely have the skill set to handle him now if I ever run into him or something alike again. I just hope I never do. I'll leave being a badass to Uncle Rick and Aunt Pat. When I was 14. Back in 2007, around mid-June, my parents had gone out for the evening, and had left me alone, which in itself was a nice break. I was downstairs watching TV, nothing, and went out to the kitchen to make some food. I don't know what it was, but something just didn't feel right to me. Chalking it up to nothing, after getting something to eat, I head back downstairs and called a friend. It was about 7 now, and my parents would be back at around 10. As I was talking to my friend, all of a sudden the line clicks. I try to get dial tone on the cordless, and nothing works, when I hear a faint beeping upstairs. It's the trouble lights on the alarm keypad. Now I'm worried. Not panicked, but worried. Then I hear footsteps outside, and I remember there is a cell bag up on the alarm. I hit the button with a police badge on it in hopes the alarm would scare whoever was outside away, and the siren went off. Grabbed my phone and dialed 911. We live on a small acreage, so there is a neighbor not too far, but farther than someone in the city. I hid in my bedroom for what felt like hours, but was only about 15 minutes, until I saw the police through the front window. My parents rushed home right away. There was a gray box on the side of the house, where the phone line comes in. Wires were sticking out, and they found a pair of electrical pliers. That was not shocking, but the other item next to it, a large butcher knife. So, person who was outside my house, let's never meet without me having a loaded gun. Creepy hospital worker dude. Okay, this happened to me yesterday. A little backstory. I am an African American female, 14, and I have sickle cell anemia, anxiety disorder, and depression since my mother's death last year. I travel every 2 weeks for the therapy from my city to the one where my doctor is, so we just arrived by Medicab company, and I really need to go to the restroom, so my grandmother took my book bag and went to go check us in. Also let me paint the picture of the outfit I was wearing, because this is also important. I was wearing my mom's black Run DMC t-shirt, which was 2 sizes too big for me. I had on gray sweatpants that were baggy on me, and I had on some blue Converse, and my hair was in a messy bun, because I wanted to be comfortable, so I wasn't really looking all that cute anyway, so on to the story. So, There were workers in the halls working on the ceiling. It was two guys, and one had just left to get something, which left me and this middle-aged man with a braided ponytail and a beer belly with a green muscle shirt way too tight for him alone. I politely said hi, because I was raised with manners. He said hi, and I entered the bathroom, and that was that. I did my business, washed my hands, and was about to join my grandma in the waiting room when the worker stops me and we started talking. Our conversation went something like this. So how old are you? 14. Really? You look much younger. I get that a lot. You're really pretty. Do you have a boyfriend? At this point, I'm getting really impatient and ready to go, and I'm always on the fence with strangers, so I have my guard up already. No, sir. I have a girlfriend. I think I should go. I try to walk away, but he continues talking. Really? You don't look like a lesbian. I raise my eyebrows, confused on what a lesbian was supposed to look like. Yeah. So you've never tried dating a boy? I bet they chase after you. I mean, you're beautiful, and you have a great ass and boobs. My alarms go off. Fishy, I haven't developed my boobs that much, and they aren't that big at all. Secondly, I have on baggy sweatpants and a big t-shirt that covers my ass. Sir, I'm 14. Listen, I really need to go. I'm guessing he took notice of my cell phone and headphones because then he asked. That doesn't mean anything. Can I have your number? Your ma wouldn't know if we was on the phone, since he got them earphones. No, I'm not giving you my phone number. I've got to go. I tried to get past him, but he grabs my arm and says, if I want to play, little girl, I will play. Chills run down my spine, and I hope someone comes down the hall. Luckily, a nurse and his boss came down and saw him. He let me go and I walked past him quickly, but not before he leaves one final creepy remark, putting his gross hands on my butt and squeezing. I want to throw up. I told my grandma, and we're now looking into getting him fired. So, creepy old worker dude at the hospital who grabbed my ass? Let's never fucking meet again. The crack in the cupboard. In 2008, a routine visit to my friend's farm changed the way I lived my life. A life full of paranoia and suspicion. As a preface, I like to clarify I was never in any harm, but the antagonist in the story went on to be a registered sex offender around last year. I am Jonas. I was born in 1996 and befriended a lifelong friend in preschool, Sammy. This friendship, years later, would test through a traumatic event in our lives. On the 4th of June 2008, around 7 days before my birthday, I visited my best friend at his farm. This had become routine over the years because I rarely ever get to see him as he lives 2 hours away from me. His parents had left for a dinner date with mine. Unfortunately, he had no gaming consoles back when the GameCube was the shit, and only had a trampoline and a Game Boy Color with Pokemon, so of course I was enthralled. Time passes and it is around 9:30 p.m. and he darts off to the bathroom, but frankly I didn't pay attention. I was lying down with the Game Boy Color being suspended over my head. I proceed to adjust myself, so I sit with my knees up and my back against the bed's backboard. As I transition seating positions, I glance into the opposing cupboard doors, which were built in. I saw a red object quickly pass by the crack in the door. Unfortunately, my best friend wore a red onesie, so I thought nothing of it and assumed he crawled to the cupboards while I was so intently focused on the game. For some reason, now that I think of it, this figure was about almost 5'10", and we were a measly 5'4", but this didn't budge my focus. I became tired of the 4-hour Pokemon binge, so I placed the Game Boy Color down and cracked my neck. As I rolled my neck side to side, I focus on the crack and see a distinctive facial feature. Thick eyebrows and wide nostrils. Nothing like my friend. But then I heard something that would cause me to break the verge of a breakdown in tears. My best friend was in the bathroom brushing his teeth. I was paralyzed. I didn't want to make obvious of my immediate panic state, so I picked up the Game Boy and continued to pretend to play it, while at all times glancing to the stream of light through the crack of the cupboard doors. My friend runs in and startles me. My heart races as I see he isn't heading towards the bed. He is sliding along the cupboard doors. He gets to the crack, and a hand reaches out and grabs him in. All I can hear is muffled screams of terror and unrelenting kicks, opening the cupboard doors and revealing a ginger boy in his late teens. He was 17 at the time, with his arms wrapped around my friend's neck, choking him. I panicked and started to cry. All I could do is muster a measly throw of the Game Boy Color, and it manages to hit him in the temple, and he collapses in a gasp of pain. Clearly dazed and confused, he loosely stumbles out of the room, and I hear him fall down the stairs, and the big wooden door of the house entry slams shut. I ran to my friend who was crying and in desperate need for a hand, so I help him up. He is completely shocked and hyperventilating. So I did what any 12-year-old would do. I cried loudly. We didn't know the phone numbers of our parents, and we had never called the police before, so it never crossed our minds. Later, the parents arrived, and I just bolted down the stairs and ran to my dad and hugged him. Meanwhile, my friend remains upstairs crying. They called the police. As on their way back, they saw someone running through their farm. The following week, we find out it was the neighbor who lived in the farm over. He intended to steal game cartridges for the Game Boy Color, but I got in there just as I had arrived, so he waited around 6 hours in the cupboard, watching us, waiting for us to move. In 2014, he molested a 6-year-old child and flashed himself to a group of 14-year-old girls at a party he crashed. When I look back and remember his face, he honestly looked like he intended to kill or badly injure my friend. It was just something about his dark, empty eyes. He never confessed to anything other than breaking and entering and assault. He was let off with a restraining order and never bothered my friend since. Dear Ginger Freak, let's not meet, for your sake. I'm 6'1" now, 105 kg. Come at me. A creep has been harassing me for over a year. Any advice is welcome. In June of last year, I moved to a borough of South London in order to pursue a master's degree in the city. I moved to this specific borough because my boyfriend works there, so it was convenient for him. Plus, it's cheaper than living in the very center. The area isn't great, not the worst, but definitely not great. It's a type of neighborhood where you walk past a bar at 9:30 a.m. on the way to class, and people are already drunk, and when you come back home at 5, they're still there. It's the type of place where junkies hang around with their Staffordshires and catcall you through rotten teeth. Of course, there are some genuinely nice, normal people in the neighborhood, but where I live, which is directly on the high street, you run into some odd characters. My first encounter with this creep happened when I was walking back from school. It was summertime, and I was wearing a kimono cover-up. This is relevant. I'm 23 years old, 22 at the time this first started, blonde with an hourglass shape, so I'm fairly used to getting attention from random men on the street. Normally people just make a comment or a noise and then go about on their day. I don't usually respond, and the situation, I'll bet someone annoying, regulates itself. Not this time. I'm listening to music and suddenly, I see a guy walking in step with me. This man is about 5'10", slim, black, with a cropped afro, wears a big 80s reading glasses, in his 20s, and is wearing both a camouflage shirt and pants as a matching set. He makes a motion for me to take out my headphones. Our conversation went something like this. "Oh hey, I like your robe." Or what do you call it? "A kimono," I say politely, but somewhat dismissively. "Where'd you get it?" he asks, walking in step with me. "Don't remember," I say, trying to blow him off, and getting confused about why we're discussing fashion together. "Oh, okay, yeah. You're a classy girl. Can I get your number? Do you like clubbing?" "Sorry, I have a boyfriend." He ignores my statement completely, still walking in step with me. He continues. "I have a cousin. He owns his club, and we can go together sometime if you want." "No, sorry, I have a boyfriend." "Oh, how about you're saying that to get rid of me?" I force a taut smile and continue walking. At this point, he has stopped following me, which is good, because I didn't want him to follow me home. I glance back to make sure he's not following me, and I notice now he's cornered some other girl. Wow, what a creep. I move on with my day. About a week later, I'm walking towards a grocery store when I see a shadow in my periphery. I turn and it's him. He motions for me to take my headphones out again, and I do. I'm confused. As I've already told him, I have a boyfriend, but I figure he may have forgotten me. "I like your sunglasses. What brand are they?" I laugh internally, thinking that this must be his smooth, open line, as this was the second time he complimented something I was wearing. "Thanks. So, do you like clubbing?" "I met you last week. I still have a boyfriend." "We met last week?" he says. "Yeah, right outside Nando's." "I don't think so. I wouldn't remember to find a girl like you." "Right. Sorry, I have to go." "Where are you from?" he asks, because he notices my North American accent, which is very uncommon here in these parts, and I tell him I'm Canadian. I figured that he would remember me now, as to my knowledge, I'm the only North American in the area. Ooh, I like Canadian girls. Cringe. Okay, I have to go. At this, he stops following me and walks the other way. Maybe 2 weeks go by, and at this point, I've told my boyfriend about the guy. He gets mildly annoyed, but figures the guy would have given up after being rejected twice in the span of a week. One night, we were coming home from central London, walking from the train station back home. In front of us, I noticed that guy, wearing the same army outfit combo I indicate that that is the man who was bothering me, so my boyfriend would know what he looked like. Funnily enough, he's following another girl and giving her the "my cousin owns a nightclub" spiel. I roll my eyes, and my boyfriend and I share a giggle to indicate how pathetic this all is. The girl completely ignores him and looks at her phone, and eventually, he loses interest and walks away. A couple more weeks go by. I'm going to the post office to mail a package. I feel a hand on my shoulder. It's him. "Slow down," he says, laughing. This time he's wearing a blue bomber jacket with some sort of like phoenix embroidered on it. At this point, I'm incredibly annoyed because he's approaching me again, and also he's touched me. "We've met before. I have a boyfriend," I say, clutching my package. "Nah, I would have remembered you." Now, I'm not sure whether this guy was joking or whether he really had that bad of a memory. I don't claim to be a pivotal of a figure that any stranger would remember me, but surely, after speaking with the guy twice, he would have some sort of recollection. "So, do you like clubbing?" "Let me guess. You have a cousin who owns a nightclub?" "Yeah! How do you know?" "Because we've spoken before. Look, I have a boyfriend, and I don't want you to follow me again. When you see me, do not approach me, because I will always say no." He doesn't say anything to this, and I look him deep in the eyes so that he will remember my face. At this point, he's walked in step with me to the post office, so I turn to go inside. As I do, he grabs my hand. I turn to face him, and he's giving me this predatory, over-the-top stare. "Do you have any single friends for me then?" I'm getting really unsettled by his energy, and more so that the guy could really be so obtuse, as if I would put any friends in that situation. "No!" I muster and head inside. He lingers at the doorway of the post office, but eventually walks away. I tell my boyfriend about this, and at this point he's angry. He offers to talk to the guy, as he says he often sees him on the way to work. According to him, every time he sees him, he's harassing some other girl. I figure this guy has way too much time on his hands, and I wonder if he does anything else besides hitting on random women in his spare time. In the following months, I'm approached by him a few more times. Each time, he gives me the spiel about his cousin owning the club, and each time, he claims he does not remember me and even comments on my accent, asking where I'm from. At this point, I do not respond, but he still talks and walks in step with me until he realizes that I am not going to speak, and then he walks away. Sometimes, I kid you not, he walks across the street and blocks another girl in her path directly after striking out with me. I figure this guy's either high on drugs or mentally ill, but probably a combination of both. I'm not sure if his inability to remember me is some tactic, or if he really has no clue that we've spoken many times. I decide to get the police involved. As I got to the point where I would have to stress about walking on the street for fear of running into him. No, he was not violent, but his energy and mannerisms indicated that he was unstable, and yes, he had touched me a few times, usually to block my path, which is unacceptable. The police come and take a statement, and although they are sympathetic, they say there's not much they can do unless I have the guy's name, photo, or phone number, so they can identify him. The officer even tells me to pretend that I am interested to get his number, so I could come forward it to the police station, and to say the least, I was very uncomfortable with that idea, and decided not to do that. The same day, I'm walking home from the grocery store with heavy bags, and turn onto the streets. I'm on a slight downward slope, and I hear, "Hey," coming from the top of the street. I turn, and it's him. "No!" I shout, as I was very near my house and didn't want him to know where I live. "Do not come near me, I'm not interested." "No? I can't come and talk to you?" He shouts back. "No, stay away!" He lingers at the top of the slope for a while, and I stay in place, as to continue walking would reveal where I live. Eventually he sees another girl, and follows her until he is out of sight. Similar occurrences happen on and off for the next few months. Sometimes I ignore him, sometimes I verbally communicate. I'm not interested. Every time, he claims not to remember me. Then I decided to call the police again after another more disturbing incident. I was walking towards a gym, and I was turning a corner. I almost bumped into that guy. At first, I didn't really clue in that it was him, but then I looked and realized who it was. I guess he took my looking at him as a sign that I was checking him out. I walked faster and turned around to see if he was following me. He wasn't. Oh, good, I thought, figuring he had better things to do this morning than bother me. I walked for a good 10 minutes, looking back every now and then. When I'm confident that he's gone, I relax and walk at my leisure. Then I hear fast footsteps behind me. I turn around, and this guy is running towards me. He either followed me discreetly for a few blocks, or he guessed my path and ran to catch up to me. "Hey, you going to the gym?" he shouts, looking at my gym clothes. "You need to work on that body. It looks gorgeous to me." At this point, I'm sprinting, trying to get away. "Hey, I gave you a compliment. Don't be rude." This guy is faster than me, and he catches up and puts his arm around to block me. I'm so mad at this point. I look him in the eyes and say, "If you bother me again, I'll call the police." "The police? I don't even know you. When have I bothered you?" I can't reason with a lunatic, so I tell him, "Remember my face this time. Leave me alone." He doesn't follow me to the gym. I call the police, and they tell me there's not much they can do since he hasn't assaulted me, but they acknowledge that his behavior is unacceptable. I figured that I would try to get an identifying photo next time I see him. Weeks go by and there's no encounter. I feel good. Maybe he finally got the message. On a cold March day, I walk to the main station, which is about 15 minutes away from my house. Fuck, he's lingering on the stairs that leads up to it. He has these wild eyes that seem to be searching for girls, any girl. He spots me and springs into action. Nice day, isn't it? He asks in a way, seems very rehearsed. Also, it wasn't a nice day. It was cold and gray. I don't answer. Nice day, isn't it? He repeats louder. I get my Oyster card out and walk quickly towards the turnstiles. I assume he doesn't have a ticket, so I would be safe as soon as I can cross them. Nice day. I cut him off. I'm shaking. I'm so upset. I've met you a million times. I told you I'm not interested. What is wrong with you? Without a beat, he says, That's rude, isn't it? I never spoken to you in my life. Right. I'm the crazy and unreasonable one. I call the police and tell them what happened, as I figured that the station would have surveillance cameras that would capture him harassing me in the act. This could give them the fodder they needed to at least give him a warning. After a few days, they call me back and tell me that the station doesn't have any outside cameras filming the entrance. I feel hopeless. Of course, my boyfriend is aware of all of this, and he gets increasingly angry with every encounter. Every morning, my boyfriend gets an energy drink from the same corner store before work. This time, as he's paying, he notices that guy, wearing the same army combo getup, enter the store. He puts a couple pounds on the counter to pay, and turns to face the creep. I need to talk to you, he says angrily. The creep gets visibly agitated and shifty and says, No, I don't want to talk to you, and runs out the store. The shop owner informs my boyfriend that this guy comes in all the time and steals merchandise. He also tries to pay for things by eating a chocolate bar at the till and saying, I'll pay you later. He's been kicked out of the store many times, but the store owner never involved the police, as apparently the process for incriminating petty criminals is complicated and would have to close his business temporarily. I was banking on the fact that he would have a record, but without a name. It was hard to find out. My most recent encounter with him happened a month ago. I was walking home from the station and noticed the guy walking in step with me this time. I decided not to freak out. I wanted to play along with him without indicating too much interest so I can get a name and photo. He starts by saying, I'm in a band with my cousin and we're looking for members. Do you want to join? Right. That's totally believable. As he's speaking, I suddenly hold my phone and take a good picture of his face. No thanks. I don't really have any musical talents, I tell him. Do you like clubbing? He asks. I ignore him and ask, So what's your name? I'm Marlon. What's yours, gorgeous? I give him a fake name and make a mental note of his name, which I remember because it's the same as Marlon Brando. So now, I have a photo and a name. The police are reviewing everything, but I feel that even with this, they're not going to be able to do much given their track record. Although he hasn't bothered me since this day, I still don't want it to happen again. I'm definitely going to move at some point, but for the time being, how do I deal with this? How can I ensure that he remembers me and stays away? Am I doing something wrong? Am I doing not enough? Does he actually not remember me, or is this some kind of lame tactic? Thanks for reading this long account. It's therapeutic to share with others. Any advice would be welcome. The wrestling coach. Wrestling. The sport that drives grown men to dress up like a 4-year-old in a ballet recital run by a high school art teacher on bath salts. If you're a wrestler, then please let me live. Right, anyways, the school's former wrestling coach, while we've never met, I certainly know the story, as does most of the school. Mostly because it was disturbing as all hell. It was early on in the school year, and most students were scrambling to get signed up for their sports and clubs in order to reclaim their position within their own little social circle before it was too late. Being a freshman, I was mostly just doing my own thing, letting the pieces fall into whatever place they may. One of my best friends, on the other hand, decided she may as well join wrestling, hoping to up her chances into getting into a good college, scholarships and all that. I just sort of teased her and all the guys would be too scared they would accidentally grab her boob or something like that, but kept an ear out for any news regarding our school's involvement with the sport. I may not be a wrestling fan, but I'd be damned if I wasn't going to do my best to support her. A short span of time passed without much happening, and it was shaping up to be a good, normal enough school year. Then my friend ever so casually mentioned that the school wrestling coach had been arrested. Unfortunately, my little siblings, 8 and 10 at the time, were in the back seat, so she couldn't really elaborate. If she had tried, I probably would have punched her, so it was best for all parties involved that she didn't speak. Still, my curiosity was sparked. I asked around for a bit, but all the information available was vague. The stories range from his having given some of the kids on the wrestling team porn for him having raped them. Needless to say, when the school paper came out a week later featuring the story of his arrest, it created a similar effect to like when you drop a bit of food and it's like instantly swarmed by ants. It's June now, and the full story has come to light, and I can't get over that something like this happened at my school, which is a high-scoring, straight-cut establishment, save for the odd transfer student who hasn't quite figured out that he's not in Kansas anymore. Not to mention my friend, who would later tell me that her mother had actually encouraged her to try out for the wrestling team because the coach noticed her and thought she had potential. And as bad as I feel for saying this, the truth is, I can't help but be grateful that he focused solely on males. To sum it up, the guy was arrested and charged with 20 charges, including distribution of lewd matter to a minor, and committing lewd and lascivious acts with a minor aged 14 to 15. Turns out he wasn't only a wrestling coach, but a youth leader for a local church, and I've been taking full advantage of both positions. In the end, he pleaded guilty to 8 of the felonies in exchange for a reduced sentence. He's currently serving 10 years, 8 months for his actions. So, child molester, wrestling coach, youth leader, let's not meet ever, and if we do, I cannot blame if somehow or some way my foot just happens to end up in your nuts. Creeper Battle. This following story happened just a few days ago, Saturday the 7th of June. I'm not sure if I was the creep or if I had run off a would-be creep with sinister motives. I was in the mood to find out the latter, so I acted like the former. I'm a female, in my early 30s, and I'm too tall. I'm about 5'9" with a thin build. I have a very soft voice, so I sometimes surprise people with my height because of how young my voice sounds. I'm only including these physical characteristics because I think they're well suited for the circumstances. I got a knock at my door around midnight 30, and it was seriously the wrong time for me to be getting any unwanted and unexpected visitors. Everyone I know to call before they come, so I automatically knew it wasn't going to be a familiar face behind my front door. I had also recently been robbed at my other house down the street, so I was already on high alert and pissed off at any would-be jerk who might be up to no good. I call out, "Hello?" and I got no quick response, so very suddenly I threw the door open and started yelling and screaming at this guy. This guy had wide, terrified eyes and backed off in a run without turning his back to me. He ran off through my bushes, but I pretty much cornered him in that direction. I was a crazy maniac. I probably looked really scary too, with my hair kind of in a wild ponytail, because I've been watching TV on my couch most of the evening. The guy looked to be either an older teenager or a young adult, maybe very early 20s. I kind of felt bad for doing that, but my neighborhood has been hit up with numerous robberies lately, and after it happened to me, I was utterly pissed about it. He had dark hair and wide frightened eyes that seemed to say, "Oh shit." I towered over him too. So I don't know if it's a good thing by scaring him off, or if it's just some poor kid in my neighborhood and thinks I'm the neighborhood psycho now. I honestly don't think anyone who knocks on a random house after midnight has good intentions though. I did call the police too and explain everything. Oh, and by the way, while the kid was running off, I screamed that if I ever saw him again, I'd shoot his ass. Two idiots spend a night at a beach. This happened late June. I was on a summer internship in a coastal city. For context, English isn't my first language, and the city isn't in the US. I was 20 years old then, and was and still am a very anxious female. The city was very new to me, even though it is a huge tourist destination. That was a first-time visit for me. My boyfriend at the time, a fellow university student, was also on the same internship as me. He was a local resident though. Let's call him Gray. Us being technically on a summer break, we're quite excited about the prospect of the various beaches and coastal nightlife. After a few weeks though, the usual routine got monotonous, as it usually does, so being the bright-eyed idiots that we were, we decided to sneak to a beach after closing time and spend the night there, camping out and doing coupley stuff. Keep in mind, most of the public beaches that were considered very dangerous at night, not only because of the high tide, but because of the high crime rate and the homeless and drug problems that cities that huge usually have. Another factor being the absence of patrolling forces in the after hours. Gray, The idiot that he was later said that he knew of the crime rates, but since being a sheltered upper-class kid, had no actual notion of it. And me, well, let's just say I have anxiety without cause, so I've learned to mostly ignore the little nitpicks and tread where the most acknowledgeable amongst us lead. So we decide on the date and place, a very off-the-route, secluded beach. It doesn't attract many tourists, as only locals know about its existence. So we ride to the beach on Gray's motorcycle, get our supplies out, and easily sneak into the beach. Now, like I said, this beach was way off the route. It was nearly 20 kilometers in the outer city, and it was located such that it was a few kilometers and through thick forest growth from the unofficial parking space. But we were undeterred and in a romantic mood, so we head right in. The first few hours there were honestly the best I've ever spent with Gray. We were drinking beer, playing music with the volume on high, running around, splashing in the water, mind you, keeping care to stay close to the beach, just generally enjoying ourselves. By 3 a.m. we were worn out, and were sitting and snuggling, talking quietly and just making out. Then suddenly, out of nowhere, I see a figure approaching our stretch of sand. It was almost full moon night. As it draws closer, I grow more and more stiff. Finally, it reaches our stretch and passes us by. It was a tall, burly, middle-aged man who looked to be down on his luck. He was staring right at me as he passed us. I was instantly feeling vulnerable and asked Gray to skedaddle, but being the hormone-driven, red-blooded male he was, he insisted on staying and convinced me that the guy was just a nighttime stroller. After all, many people like beaches at night, right? So we continued with our snogging and snuggling, when a few moments later, guess what happens? That same man from the opposite direction passes us again. This time, though, we didn't notice his ascent, as we were rather busy, until he was right next to our stretch. He was smiling the whole time. I was way beyond spooked now, and wanted to get out ASAP, but Gray rationalized that maybe the guy was just heading back. In any case, we had to stay put, because Gray felt that he was too intoxicated to ride. He said to give him an hour or so to mellow out a little more. We checked our phones and they, as is expected of them in a horror and needy situation, were drained of battery. Following Murphy's Law to the T, I was very stiff and tense by then, and stewing internally. I was only then realizing what a stupid idea it was to come out so late to such a foreign place, with no one except maybe a wannabe rapist, serial killer around. So we are again left alone, and just to be on the safe side, I decided to acquaint myself with the largest stick and driftwood I can find, which I did. Gray laughed at my attempts to arm ourselves, and wasted no time in telling me that if that man really wanted to get at us, that measly piece of wood would do nothing to stop him. I decided right then that Gray was an overconfident dumbass, so I sat down again. By this time, another 20 or so minutes have gone by, and Gray wanted to resume where we left off, but the mood was ruined for me. And honestly, I was just waiting for Gray to regain his senses so we can get the fuck out of there. By the time another 20 to 25 minutes passed without any sightings of the man, I have sufficiently calmed down, and Gray was also feeling back to normal, not that he was ever really worried. Read, Gray, a overconfident idiot. An hour or so has passed, and I'm beginning to feel sleepy. I forget to mention that we were reclining against a sand dune kind of thing, which stretched on for a mile in either directions, so in order to leave, we'd have to climb it up. It wasn't that high, maybe mid-thigh length, and then continue towards a forest area, which steadily grows thick. The underbrush forest itself wasn't that long, just a few yards really, so Gray is almost asleep with half of him on top of me, when suddenly I hear a voice from behind us. It was a weird combination of a moan and a hiss. I jerked back to look at what it was, and horrors of all horrors, its source was a kneeling figure a few yards away from us. It was the same man, with the moon shining on him. I can clearly see that he was bare-bottom, and was pleasuring himself. I think I went numb with shock, maybe letting a soft gasp escape, but Gray was jumping up and pulling me up too. Suddenly the man got up too, and I vividly remember him stepping out of his pants, as cool as a cucumber, and calmly walking towards us. I might have screamed at that point. Gray scrambled to pick up the stick that I had previously found, and started brandishing it wildly and shouting at the man to back off. The man stopped and stared and smiled at us, all the while touching himself. We scrambled up the dune and started running back, cutting a wide path around the man. As we reached the woods, I was constantly looking back and saw him start to walk and run towards us. I screamed so loudly that I rattled Gray, who was pulling me along. We then flat out sprinted towards a parking space. Upon reaching it, we saw that the bike was laying down on the ground, like someone had pushed at it. I thought I might pass out with the stress, but Gray kept a cool head and calmly pulled the bike upright and turned it on. It was working still. I hopped on behind him and we peeled out of there. We were very quiet the whole ride to the inner part of the city, with me constantly looking back, expecting to see the man running towards us, but fortunately nothing, and no one was following us. By the time we reached the inner city, we stopped at a little crowded place, considering the time to take a breather. I was exhausted, as I was wearing a skirt with no pockets. Gray was carrying my mobile in his jacket, which he later realized he had dropped while we were running. We were both unwilling to go back and look for it, so that was another instance of Murphy's Law in action. But come morning, we did all that was necessary, blocked my previous SIM cards, and Gray got me a new phone. We didn't contact the police as it was quite apparent that we were in the wrong, technically trespassing when it was expressly advised against. Also because we had no information to give them. So that was the night I learned that it was okay to be a little anxious, and lost my poor little mobile phone. So, the creepy dude at the beach, let's not meet ever again. Forests. Some background. I live in the Pacific Northwest in a smallish town. About an hour from Seattle, really close to my home, is an enormous state forest. For my birthday, my dad suggested we go for a hike in that forest. I was uneasy at first, because this forest does have somewhat of a history. There is a legal business here, and the majority of it is in that state forest, because it isn't anyone's jurisdiction. Basically, you should hope that you aren't spotted as a witness to a drug operations or illegal logging. To make matters worse, the forest is used as a dumping ground, as well as a remote site to commit murders. The murders don't really exceed one every 3 to 4 years. The ones that happen in the forest are generally drug-related, while the bodies dumped there vary in the motive. There is also a minimum security correction center in the south end of the forest. So on an early spring weekend, I went for a day hike with my dad. There was no going in the overcast and rainy off-season. We knew there would be no foot or motor traffic, which is nice. We started out in the southeastern portion, walking through the occasional clear-cut, but after the first mile, moved into dense forest. There wasn't much to see. It was terribly muddy. I had little to distract me but the sound of my own footsteps, until I heard other footsteps. The footsteps were loud and deliberate, as a human's would be, but they weren't more hikers. They were coming from the trees above. I was uncomfortable, but also armed with a hunting knife. I decided it was probably an animal despite seeing none or even hearing birds. A short while later, I heard low voices. This, I could only think. If I don't bother them, they won't bother me. So I tried to forget it. I am cursed with incredibly good hearing, though, making it hard to get rid of my suspicions. Walking on, we passed a seemingly still body of water to the left. It was weird. It connected to a creek on both sides, but it was large and unmoving, like a pond. Additionally, there was no life of any kind, no fish, hardly any plants but brown algae and thick yellow grass. On the right, the forest was ridiculously dense, with a few spur trails that disappear into it within a few feet. All of it a bit weird, but not suspicious. We kept walking to a small waterfall about 100 feet ahead. My dad had become busy taking pictures. I surveyed the area and turned around, looking back at the trail. Then I saw him. In the distance, a tall, lanky man in grungy-looking clothing practically leapt out from the side of the trail with a pond, and in another bound, across the trail into the trees on the other side. I assumed he's continued down a spur trail to who knows where. It was so quick that I didn't even react. I saw him. He was gone. Into the trees. My dad decided we should head back. After taking a sufficient amount of pictures, and we headed down. As we did that, there was a small organized pile of fern leaves in the center of the trail, pointed in the direction we were heading. My dad didn't know what to make of it, because we did not see anyone on the trail that day. Well, he didn't. Abduction in broad daylight. Okay, so I was reading a story on here, and it made me think about a similar situation that happened the summer going into my senior year in high school. My best buddy Thomas and I were supposed to hang out that day. It was around June. The plan was, I meet him at the hospital his mom works at, and we walk around the area together. The hospital was a large part of an inner-city college, so there were plenty of things to do, whether in the hospital or just in the area. I got dropped off at the hospital around 7 a.m. because my mom had to be at work soon, but Thomas texted me and said he wouldn't be there until 8:30 a.m. I kinda brushed it off, not really upset or anything like that. I figured I'd just walk around the hospital for a little bit until he showed up. I walked around the first corridor of the hospital for about 30 minutes, but I eventually grew tired of hanging around in there and decided to go outside. It was a beautiful sunny day, so why not explore? It's a college area, so it's fairly populated, normally, lots of traffic and a moderate amount of pedestrians strolling around in the area. I walked outside and head down the street, and around the block, I reached a familiar street, only a block or so away from my previous area. The hospital is large and has different pavilions that have glass walkway bridges over traffic, leading to the outer buildings. I was still beside the hospital parking deck, but I decided to stop by my favorite burger place to get a sandwich. When I came out, I chose to sit down and relax on a bench just across the street from the burger place. It was kind of a secluded bench area, still close to the sidewalk and about 40 feet from traffic, but it was right beside a ramp, and at the time, nobody was walking around on that side of the road. I didn't really think very much about any of that stuff. I passed this bench every day and on the road back to my house, and I was really familiar with the area and the college campus, so I really didn't feel too unsafe. I soon learned how naive I was being. I'd only been sitting on that bench for 15 minutes, and next thing I know, I heard somebody shouting towards the street. When I looked up from my phone, I saw on the road there was a turquoise beaten-up sedan waiting at a red light with a passenger window down. A 40-ish old guy was peeking out at me from the driver's side, screaming all the way from the road. There was a ramp, a sidewalk, a wide stretch of grass, and parking meter spots in between us, so he was about 40 to 60 feet away. He leaned over and yelled, "Hey!" I looked over, figuring he was talking to someone else and not me. Nope, I was alone. Fuck. "Yeah, you! Come here!" I looked around again, feeling my heartbeat speed up. I decided that he would go away if I ignored his calls. I mean, that light had to turn green sometime, right? He yelled a little longer, not seeming angry, just trying to get my attention to come over. I tried to focus intently on my phone to block him out. His light turned green and he was forced to drive on. I let out a sigh of relief. I was at peace again. I still felt the previous unease and started to consider moving somewhere else, but I pushed the thought of it out of my mind. I guess I figured that what are the odds that this man will come back? Yes, I know, I was so naive. Typical innocent, unsuspecting 17-year-old girl. So I stayed put, looking at Facebook on my phone. After about 3 minutes, I hear yelling again. The same voice. My heart skips a beat. I look up, and there's a psycho man yelling, sounding a bit irritated that I won't come to his car. I resisted the urge to pull on the hem of my jean shorts to make them seem longer. I once again attempted to ignore this man, and he just kept yelling, "Hey girl, come over here. Why don't you just come over here?" Once again, his light turns from red to green, and he is forced to drive off again. At this point, I'm thinking, what the fuck? This dude seriously circled a block? That was when I figured he was not your typical man, just desperate for a phone number. I should probably get out of that area because he's definitely crazy. And it sounded like he was kind of like about to lose his temper, but where should I go? Can't cross the street to the burger place. That street light will take too long to change. And by the time it does make the light red, I'll basically be crossing the streets right in front of this man. I guess I was having a mental argument with myself about what to do for too long because the next thing I know, I heard the same familiar voice. My heart dropped. Fuck. He was back. That was fast. I couldn't just bolt right there. He would probably follow me in his car and run me over or kidnap me or something. I attempted once again to look away and ignore his advances. This time was a hell of a lot scarier. He was full-blown angry about me ignoring him. He screamed as loud as he could, honked his horn, and what frightened me the most is that he stopped his car in the middle of a green light. He was doing the most, and the entire time, all I could do was sit there in shock. He looked like for a minute he was about to hop out of his car and come over to force me to get in his car. I was frozen in fear, and adrenaline pumped so hard through my body that it was slightly suffocating to my lungs. I guess you can call that almost a panic attack. My whole body felt tingly and light. "Get the fuck over here! Now!" He screamed and honked for what seemed like forever. I continued to stare in fear. Traffic started honking back at him, attempting to make him move the fuck out their way, and just as he had one foot slightly out of his car, he fell back into his seat, closed the door, and drove off. At that moment, it felt like something came and knocked me off my ass. I jumped up, taking short panicked breaths. I had to roll the fuck out of there and fast before he circled back and actually parked his car, but where to go? I immediately took off down the street towards the hospital. I couldn't cross the street to the burger place, as that would take forever. No, I would run all the way to the emergency room entrance, all the way 200 to 400 feet down the sidewalk, 30 feet down the isolated ambulance driveway and into the hospital, and I would do it all without him ever making it around to see me. I gave that run my all. To my surprise, there were actually no stores on that side of the street that I was on, just parking garage entrances and alleyways. When I ran to the hospital, I didn't look back. I flew inside the entrance of the emergency room and made my way down the hall and around the corner before I stopped to catch my breath. I was shaking and my heart was pumping so fast I thought I'd faint. All was well after I was in the hospital, and after I calmed down, I texted my friend, "Thomas, where the fuck are you? I almost got abducted out there." He then replied saying, "What the fuck? and that he would be there in just under 10 minutes, and he told me not to leave the hospital. Didn't have to tell my ass twice. I was not leaving that hospital with that psycho on the loose. Thomas showed up a few minutes later, and I told him all the details. Then we sat in the back employee lunchroom area and watched the TV and wandered around the hospital for the rest of the day. What I hadn't known at the moment was that the particular college we were walking around, although very famous and known for its awesome medical program, it's also a breeding ground for muggings, car theft, creepy fucks fucking with innocent people, and it's just an all-around dangerous place to walk around alone. My mom dropped me off assuming we were gonna hang out at the hospital the whole time. For the most part, aside from getting a quick snack, that actually was the plan. Not so much anymore after that. So much for feeling safe in that area.